Riddle me this, what does this car, the Porsche 918, have in common with the upcoming 2020 Porsche Taycan? I'll give you a second there to sort that out. My, this is incredibly lovely. If you said that the interior of the Porsche 918 was designed by the same man that designed the interior of the upcoming 2020 Porsche Taycan, you would be correct. His name is Torsten. He is an incredible designer, and he traveled all the way to Atlanta, as I did in August, to see the interior as well as go through a tech deep dive of the car. The only thing I can show you now is parts of the interior and talk about the UX. So without further ado, let's see at least a glimpse of the 2020 Porsche Taycan. Now there is a lot going on here, so we have to break it down into smaller chunks. There is the overall design, then there are the screens, which there are many, and then there's the UX, although I've been corrected by the father of this system. He says it's a driver experience, so a DX. So let's go into the design first. Now, you look at this, and you really wouldn't be surprised if you were a Porsche aficionado for it to look like this. Horizontal lines, you have a very 911-esque binnacle here, although there's some changes here, we'll get to that in a bit. But something that's really, really important about this that's not specific to the Taycan, also in Cayennes and Panameras, is the design of the dashboard over there. You think about what a dashboard was back in the day when there were Packards, it literally was a wooden board there. Well, I always wanted a Porsche to look like a 928 on the inside, because you think about that and it's more open, it's more airy, especially in a big vehicle like these. And it turns out it's not an aesthetics thing or a design thing on their part, it's more about safety and function. So if you go to pretty much any municipality around the world, there are differing laws about how to handle a passenger on impact. And yeah, most people, most car guys and gals like you and I would be wearing a seatbelt. But in some cases, some people wouldn't be wearing a seatbelt, and those laws have to take into account when someone isn't wearing a seatbelt. So as a result, there is a supplemental restraint system in every car nowadays, but that alone can't do the work of keeping a passenger that's unbelted in the car. So there is some structure in the dash, and that's something you've seen on Cayennes and Panameras. Now you see the same thing here. Now let's move on to some of the other design functions. Now you take a look at the interior of any episode of Porsche we've done over the past, I don't know, 10 years, and we've talked about contrasting colors and different materials, like we had Santa Maria Madre di Dios, that GT3 Touring. That was gorgeous, but then there was a guy who I met on a shoot, a BMW shoot, that had a beautiful green GT3 Touring, but he had the houndstooth, and it's amazing how much color and trim can impact a car. Well, here they're doing different color and trim options. So pretty much all of them will have a darker dash top, but then there are options of two-tone, so you can get a different color here, but it's not the entire car that changes the color. It's still a darker tone here and darker on top of the door panels, but this color will be kind of at your armrest and lower, and then the actual carpets themselves and the lower door panels would be this color. So it's a very unique interpretation of, remember how like Ferraris and other Italian cars were back in the 60s where they had these beautiful design elements? It's kind of like that. Now, I would love to get into more detail about color and trim and the rest of this interior, but all we have right now is a dashboard, so let's focus back on the dashboard. There are a couple of different trim options. So like most standard Porsches, there is a black trim on offer. And then my favorite is there's a lighter color wood on offer that looks particularly good in a two-tone option. They showed us this very cool one with the black top of the dash and a Bordeaux red leather seat and red leather here. It looked incredibly cool. Now let's get into the screens, and this is where the biggest change has happened. So there are screens here, here, and here. There is a secret we'll talk about later in the episode, but let's focus on this one here first, because this is the closest one to a 1963 Porsche 911. The general shape is the same, but what's happened is this is now a curved screen. Do you remember our Lexus RX episode from about a year and a half ago, where we went behind the scenes with the folks at Samsung, really Harman Kardon, and they showed us some early mock-ups of these curved screens? Well, this is the actual first curved screen I'm seeing in a production vehicle. This one is not made by Samsung, but the general interpretation is the same of a curved screen, which I have to say, in person, it is wonderful to look at. Now, the first question is, what about glare? Because that's the first thing that I thought. Remember we drove, what, the Mercedes-Benz, the GLE 450, has a similar concept of there's no binnacle over here. I spoke to Torsten, who was the design lead on the interior. This was a big fight. They wanted to make sure that they preserved the interior from the Michelin concept and keep it without the binnacle. But how do you do that in the practicality of driving the car in the sunlight of, say, California? Well, it turns out they worked with a supplier and they've changed the actual glass here. This is real glass. And it's the chemical formulation of the glass as well as what covers the glass. And we saw that in the Mercedes that it actually worked pretty well. Then we get into the actual contents of the screen, and it's broken up really into three parts. The center, which is the digital part of the screen, and then call these like hard buttons. So over on the side here, it's the typical, if you're familiar with a Porsche, we can adjust the shocks, turn off the traction control, adjust the height. Here's the Joker button. I didn't make that up. The Porsche folks actually made that up. And then all the lights over here rather than on the stock. Now let's focus on the most important part of this binnacle here, and that is the screen, which can be customized. Here is the basic setting. This is the power meter setting. 3 different gauges like any proper Porsche, but in the center, notice what's missing. It does not have a tachometer. This can be reconfigured with this roller ball here, and we can go into a map, and then we could go into an extended map. So that gives me this widescreen. Remember in the Audi TT we drove like years ago? Similar type system here. And then we go into a reduced setting. I like to call this the old Saab black panel setting because it's just the speedometer. And we can go back to the power meter, which is what replaces the tachometer. So let's move on from there, and just below it, just like any proper Porsche, the start button is over here. Instead of it actually being a key, it's a button. And then the shifter over here, very reminiscent of the 992. In the 992, it's over here. And this is where I feel is the generational shift of not just the Taycan, but more the UX or driver experience as Porsche is calling it. Now, the first thing you notice is a screen. It's 10.9 inches. It's not particularly big when you consider all the other screens that are out there nowadays, but this is where I have yelled at you guys for years when screens are too big or something is too complex. What happens is you are focusing over here, not focusing on driving. That is not safe. So everything you are looking at here is a function of making it very usable on a daily basis and also safe. So the first thing you see is look at these menu buttons here. These are consistent no matter what app you're using or no matter what user experience you're using. So this is fitted with Apple CarPlay as standard. So let's say for the sake of discussion, I had my phone connected to this via Apple CarPlay and Apple took over this part of the screen, this would still be here. If I had the map up, same thing, this would still be here. Now, what's more ingenious about this system, and I'm going to admit here, I am very much a Mac guy. I used to work for Apple for 5 years. Take a look at this. Go into the media here, and you see a play menu, a playlist, favorites, and sound. And it gives very usable, simple, legible lists here. But let's say for the sake of discussion, I go back into menu and I go into phone, same thing. I get menus up here. Granted, the functionality has changed, but it's organized the same, and it works this way throughout the entire operating system. So the concept is it's very similar to what you and I are already using in either Mac, Windows, whatever you're on. Then let's go back into here. And something particularly interesting, and we found this after the engineers left, I was playing around with it some more. These are tiles, much like you and I are used to on our phones. But these can be moved around much like your iPhone or your Android. So let's say for the sake of discussion, I want to move climate down. So I press and hold this. I can go to resort. And if I want to move home link, not that I want to do that, but let's say for the sake of discussion, I want that to be the top, I can do that. Let's say if I want to move weather, I put that up to the top as well. And then if I go back into the menu, notice home link and weather have been reconfigured. Now these, because they're the main apps that are in the UX, they always stay the same. Now this carries through into the vehicle settings. Have all the same type of menu structure here with different functions. So here's the drive function, very similar to what any Porsche would have. This one obviously is not set up because it's only a dashboard, not an entire car. Trip functions. And then down here, this is a new button. This is notifications. So think about when you walk away from your telephone, you have notifications, missed calls, missed text messages, all of that is here, but this is pulling from different applications. So this is all notifications. This is notifications just from the car, notifications like missed calls, and then messages. Super important here, we've talked about this in different cars. Android and the rest of the world and Apple use a different messaging standard. So from what I understand of the Android world, this would be supported here, messaging. However, from the Apple world, it still would need to go through Apple CarPlay. Then something really interesting, this is the main home screen. You can have 3 different widgets set up. Right now I've got the drive mode, I've got the trip information, and I've got charging. After all, it's an electric car, at least a portion of electric car. But I can change that. So I press this, I go into configure my screen, and then here's a list of all the widgets that I can put in there. So let's say for the sake of discussion, I'm a music guy. So I press and hold this, and I just drag and drop it into there. Let's say I want to put in the map. I drag and drop that into there. And then, I don't know why, maybe I'd want to have ambient lighting. So I've completely reconfigured the widgets. So this is literally the main menu that comes up. So then let's go back to that. Super important thing that I forgot to tell you guys about. It turns out Apple and Porsche have gone into a partnership on music. So Apple Music, kind of a Spotify of the Apple world. And what they've done now, it comes fitted as standard for 3 months, actually 6 months if you do not have Apple Music, 3 months if you do have Apple Music, and then 3 years of data from the car. So it's not taking up the data from your telephone itself. Now we move on to this screen down here, and there's one major difference between this screen and this screen, in that this one provides haptic feedback. Yes, I am a pilot, I am a plane guy, and I would want real toggle switches, but in today's day and age, we are getting haptic feedback. So here, if I adjust the temperature, adjust the fan speed, I'm getting haptic feedback. But I can also sync that, and look what happens, it condenses down to just the temperature and the fan speed. So now moving further south in the haptic screen, you would think I didn't configure this part of the screen. You would think wrong, because that is a trackpad. So let's say for the sake of discussion, I want to go into the navigation. And I want to search. We are not far from Atlanta Airport. So I'm going to go into this search here, and then I'm going to try to write in A. Oh, the first one that comes up is Atlanta Airport. So I would do this. And I can set the navigation, and it's a huge, busiest airport in the world. You can see it now on your screen. So let's keep that the way it is. Then we go further south in this screen, and think of these as like hard buttons. There's volume for the audio system, but that is also here. Thankfully, they have moved that scroll thing in the Panamera. They moved it over to here. Vielen Dank. And then there is the sport button, and then this is the parking assist. Then you see this power button here. And it's not about the car, because we turn the car on and off here. This, you know I like party tricks, and here's the party trick. Hit this. Now before I do this, I just want to point out, 9 years ago, you and I built a concept car together. We were 9 months in the belly of the beast of the Hyundai Design Studio in Irvine, California, where we built a car that had a screen all the way across the dash, so the passenger could use the screen while driving. That was 9 years ago, and that was fiction, and we actually had to get an animation for it to work. The passenger couldn't actually use it. You ready for this? Passenger screen. And get this, the passenger can actually use it. And notice, it is the exact same operating system, and check this out. Look at the speed of it. We're running one processor to run this screen, this screen, this screen, and this screen, and it has all of the same apps. The only app it doesn't have over there is obviously drive settings, because you don't want the passenger to switch the thing over to sports setting. Like I have a pilot buddy of mine, he likes to pull the e-brake in my old car. I don't like that. Think of this as the modern interpretation. So here, the passenger can go into navigation, and the passenger can even change their view. So this is right now satellite. Passenger can go to 3D. Passenger can go to north up. And look at this. I'm still rendering all of the graphics over here. This, people, if you are not a computer geek, you have no idea how amazing this is, because how many cars have we lived through where you have such slow operating systems? It's not the actual programming, it's the processor that does that. But this isn't totally isolated from the rest of the UX here. Let's say, for the sake of discussion, the passenger is the one that's going to find the navigation, because how many times have you been with your wife, your girlfriend, your grandmother, and you're trying to find a location? You can't enter in the navigation, you can't type it in, it either has to be voice, or it has to go through Apple CarPlay and use the voice there. Here, the passenger can type it in, so they can go through here. Let's say, for the sake of discussion, we want to go to the Georgia Aquarium. So I can either add that as a stopover or add it as a current destination. I want to change the destination, and look what happens over here. We've just changed the destination. So the passenger literally passed it over. Oliver, he spent a lot of time focusing on, this is all about functionality. So yeah, they could have made this cool graphic to come over and make it look very like whiz bang, but the reality is, look how fast it did that. This is something that's incredibly, I think the two biggest steps forward in this UX is, number one, the speed, and number two, the fact that you have a UX that is consistent in every single app. Now, there's a hell of a lot more with the UX. We'll cover it when we actually get the car, but there's two more party tricks I want to show you. Number one, look here, you can't move the vents at all, whether it's over here or over here, up, down, side to side. Go into the menu here, and you can change the direction of the vents. So there's one setting where you could have it diffuse, so the Porsche setting, or you can have it more focused, or you could do it as individual where you can manually go in there. This, I don't know if I'm 100% sold on. I like this concept because it is a party trick, but I don't know how much I would use this over time. Think of this as like an additional question. Would you guys use this, or would you want it to be more the old type setting, and why? Then the last party trick, it's an electric car. So you can open up the front, because it's a Porsche, or you can open up the back from the screen here. Today is what you would call a very good day at the office. Huge thank you to Porsche Cars North America and Porsche Cars AG for having me here. And today wasn't just about the interior. We did a huge tech deep dive on the car, including some seat time. No, I didn't get to drive it. I got a ride along with one of the engineers. And he's not just an engineer. I would say this guy could give Vaughn Gittin Jr. a run for his money. But I can't share any of that with you yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all the stuff we got today, all the stuff we get at the reveal on September 4th, and turn that into like one massive tech review that we're going to share with you guys at all of our distribution points on Saturday, September 7th. So make sure you come back Saturday, September 7th. I will be posting a bunch on Instagram from the reveal on September 4th. That being the case, I'm going to turn this around to you guys and open up this to you. What did you like of what you saw? And provide any feedback, because I'm definitely going to share this with some of the folks at Porsche. There was a number of people involved in this project for the past 5 years, and you know what? I actually can't share that with you yet because it would be breaking the embargo. Until I see you next time, bis später.